Okay, great. So if we could go back to the Gemara here on, again, we're just going to go back for a minute just to where we were. So the Mishnah says on base Amud Aleph that the Mishnah says on base Amud Aleph that if a shliach, if an agent brings a get, a divorce contract from from Israel to the diaspora, that he when he delivers the divorce contract to the wife, he has to proclaim b'fanai nechta b'fanai nechta. He has to attest to the fact that he was present at the time of the writing and of the signing of the get. And the Gemara on Daf Beis Amud Aleph to the beginning of Beis Amud Beis, as we discussed, suggests that there's an argument about the reason behind this. If you have your Gemara, so Rabbi said Lefisha Ein Bekiyan Lishma, and Rabbi said Lefisha Ein Edim Mitzuyim Lekaimo, which means that according to Rabbi, the problem that we're trying to address is the problem of Lishma. A get has to be written exclusively for a particular couple. You can't use a mail order or generic factory produced get, even if the information on it happens to be accurate. It needs to be, designated, specially or specifically for the parties involved. And therefore, the concern was that this was well known in the communities in Eretz Yisrael. However, in the diaspora, or at least in some parts of the diaspora, this was this information, was not as well understood, and therefore any get coming from Chutz La'aretz, coming from the diaspora to Eretz Yisrael, had to be accompanied by a declaration, according to Rabbi, b'fanai nechtav, b'fanai nechtam, that this was formulated in my presence, the ksiva and the chasima. And this is the way that then they would quiz him further and say, was it Lishma? Were you there? Are you sure? Etc. Rava gives a different explanation. Lefisha ein edim mitzuyim l'kaimu. Rava says that the reasoning is a little bit different, and that's because there was a breakdown in communication between Eretz Yisrael and the diaspora in that period of time, and therefore there wasn't a sense of confidence that if there would be a challenge to the veracity or authenticity of the get, that that would be authenticated properly, that people would know and they would come in order to establish the authenticity of the get. And therefore, since it was that concern, they figured they wanted to get like evidence on the record at the time of the divorce itself. So if the shliach could say, b'fanai nachtam, I hereby attest to the, I was there when it was signed, I was there when it was written, I can establish unequivocally that this is an accurate and legal document that came from the actual sources, that it's not some sort of a, forgery or some mischievous, plot by somebody. So that would take care of the problem. That's the view of Rabbi. So then on Dab Gimel Amud Aleph, the last line, the Gemara asked the question. The Gemara said, "Man haytana de boy ksiva lishma, boy chasima lishma." The Gemara says, why, if according to the reasoning of Rabbah, which is that you need the agent, you need the shliach to declare b'fanai nechtam in order to establish that it was lishma. So the Gemara says, well, why do you need b'fanai nechtam and b'fanai nechtam? It should be enough to have one or the other. And that's what I'm just reviewing for a moment. And that's what the Gemara says, because Ira b'meir chasiva boy, ksiva lo boy. And if it's Rabbi Eliezer, then ksiva boy and chasima lo boy. Meaning, we don't need to go over the whole Gemara because we did last week, but basically what the Gemara is referring to is the monumental debate between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Meir about the nature of a contract. Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that Eidei Chasima Karsi, which means that the key point of any contract is the signature of the witnesses. Their sign testimony in the document itself is what makes the document a valid contract. That means Eidei Chasima Karsi. The witnesses signing is what gives legal validity to the contract. Eidei Chasima Karsi. So the Gemara says, but if that's the case, then there should be no need for the text to be lishma. All we should care about is that the signature of the Edom is lishma. The Edom sign, right, for the sake of this particular get. It's a get between, Bob and Sally, and the signatures reflect this. They didn't sign, on some generic get. They signed on a specific get. But the text itself of the get doesn't need to be lishma. On the other hand, Rabbi Eliezer had a very different view. Rabbi Eliezer's view was that Eidei Masira Karsi, which means that after all, what is it that is the critical moment in a transaction? Is it the preparation of the document, or is it the handing over of the document? Clearly, when the husband gives his wife a get directly or through a shliach, an agent, when the mocher, the previous owner of the property, hands over the deed of sale to the purchaser, when the debtor, right, hands over a contract, a debt contract to the malva, and in exchange receives, $100. That's the critical moment. That's when the transaction actually takes place.
But in the case of Gittin, the pasuk says both.
What?
In case of Gittin, the pasuk says because feminist and nosna, so it has both of them.
No, every transaction has both of them.
No, but there's a pasuk that particularly applies to Gittin, which has those two words, which one helps the one helps the mayor, one helps Rabbi Eliezer. I mean, but they each have a word to rely on. Well, what makes one better than the other?
No, I mean, either way, remember that the law, either way, refers to v'kasav. And the only question is whether v'kasav means v'kasav or v'kasav means v'kasam, but which means the signatures. I'm just trying to explain not Gittin only, but the larger argument between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Meir, which applies in other staros as well, which is why I'm giving the example of a debt, and I'm giving the example of a real estate purchase, and so on and so forth. And there, I'm just saying there are two critical times. Everybody agrees on two critical times. One is you need to prepare the document properly. The document has to have a certain kind of text. It has to tell a certain kind of story. In any shtar, there needs to be a text, right? And everybody agrees that it needs to be delivered, executed. So the point is that for Rabbi Eliezer, it's the delivery is the key, and therefore the Edom need to be present at the time of the delivery. For Rabbi Meir, the key thing is that the document is fully executed, and effective, so that once it is handed over, right, that the other party is controlling a text which is also independently validated by the witnesses. So you don't need anything other than the text itself. So basically, there's this argument between Rabbi Eliezer and Meir. It's really a fundamental argument about what a contract, really is. I mean, Rabbi Meir thinks the contract is about the independent wording, the text itself, the text that is independent of any need of additional or extraneous verification. So you have to have the text, and you have to have the signatures of the Edom already in the text, or appended to the text itself. Rabbi Eliezer.
When he says kasiva, he means really ksiva and kasima.
Yeah, but except for on the lishma part, it means only, or primarily it means chasima. It means the part of the ksiva that is, that is koreses, the part of the chasima that matters. You could write all sorts of things in a document, But when we say the written part of the document, we mean the part of the document that is legally effective.
Which
the part of the document
you would say is the chasima.
According to Rabbi Meir, that's the chasima.
So therefore, the chasima does not have to be lishma.
Lishma.
And therefore, he would not make a difference between the Torah and the other part of the.
Well, the tofes. Yeah, correct. Basically not. So basically, the Gemara says, well, if Rabbi Meir is the author of the Mishnah, then you shouldn't have had to say b'fanai nachtam. Should have been enough to say b'fanai nachtam. But if Rabbi Eliezer is the author of the Mishnah, and Rabbi Eliezer holds Edim Mesira Karsi, remember, this is a whole different perspective on the surface. What does Rabbi Eliezer think? You can have a contract in which there are no signators or signatures. All you have is a text.
Walter, I have the same problem with my computer tonight as last week. There's no sound. I have the
Rabbi,
picture,
we can hear you.
Sound.
Rabbi Roth, we can hear you.
We hear you.
He doesn't realize. Okay.
Is he not hearing us?
I don't know why.
He sounds like he's not hearing us, but we can hear him. He's on the phone.
I have to go to settings, huh?
Let me text Walter.
I think it's it's the setting on his computer.
He probably doesn't know how to
Then
do
the
it.
sound.
Somebody should tell them that we hear him
Just a moment.
loud and clear.
This is not going to work.
Okay.
Yes, of course.
We're giving tech support even as we're giving the share.
Let me try this setting. Yeah.
You're gonna have to talk, Rabbi, to let him know that
Settings. I've got settings now.
Yeah, I don't know. He can't hear me, so I don't know.
Well, once he gets it working, he'll want to hear your voice.
I
Yeah,
want to
he
get started
probably-
on another route.
Yeah. Anyways, so I'm
Get
gonna
even
continue
more
what I'm
out of
saying.
Windows.
All right, texted Walter. Let's go.
Okay.
What?
So it's again, it's happened to me as well. It's a setting probably
It's
on his
annoying.
Oh
computer.
my.
Okay, we're
I'm
going to
gonna call Rabbi
continue.
Roth. I'll call Rabbi Roth directly.
So
Okay.
So this is the argument. So according to Rabbi Eliezer, basically you have a document which has no signatures, just has a text. The Eidim are present when the document is handed over. So that's Ksiva Lishma. There is no Chasima Lishma because there's no Chasima. So that's why the Gemara.
Witness were present.
Should I? Okay, I'll guess I'll do that.
You tell them that somebody should on the phone.
When it was handed over from whom to whom?
Should tell them that we hear him very clearly.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, I
very good.
haven't. It's in the.
You're getting a message.
The Eidim were present from whom to whom?
The Eidim are present when we hand over the document from the Baal to the Isha, or the Shliach hands over the document.
Way after it was written, could be 5
Way
days
after.
later. So according to Rabbi Lezer, there doesn't have to be any lishma at all in the writing of the document.
No,
Hello?
not true. The Lishma has to be in the text.
I don't hear
the
you,
text is
Jacob.
written, that has to be Lishma, because it says V'kasav.
Yes, I know.
law.
I will walk to all
So
of
He's
you.
only arguing that the chasima doesn't have to be lishma.
Correct.
And instead of the chasima, the nesina should be lishma.
No, then whether I think this is what we discussed last week. Then whether the Mesira needs to be Lishma is a
Jacob, I
Gemara.
don't hear you.
That's a Gemara on Pei Vav Amud Beis, a discussion of Rabbi Yirmiyah and the Chachamim.
Yeah, something
So
like
Rabbi
that.
Lezer is not
apparently.
taking a position on the mesira.
Whether the Mesira needs to be Lishma,
Yeah.
that's a Gemara on Pei Vav
No,
Amud Beis.
I'm on the phone
I
with
turn for 1
Walter.
minute to Pei Vav Amud Beis. We'll illustrate that just for 1 more minute, and then we'll go back
Is
to
the
it.
volume up? I don't know. You got it.
So
I have to get into settings.
the Gemara here on Pei Vav Amud Beis.
What?
See the Mishnah?
Hey, Vav Amud Beis.
Pei Vav Amud Beis, 86b.
Daled. Hey.
We can hear Rabbi Roth. We can hear you.
He's not hearing you.
Okay.
It was
Jacob
Jacob.
on base, Mishnah.
I'll tell you later.
So the Mishnah says,
I'll tell you later.
Shayim shesholchu shnei gitin shavin. Right? There were two exact gets, gitin, information-wise, meaning two men with the same
Two
name.
Reuven's to 2 layers.
Two Reuvens were divorcing. Each Reuven was divorcing his soon-to-be former Leah,
Yeah,
correct?
right.
And Vinis Arvu,
They got mixed up.
the Gittin got mixed up with each other. So the Mishnah gives you an eitzah, what to do. The Mishnah says, what you do is, no sein shneim lazu, ushneim lazu. You give each Leah,
Both of them.
each one gives both Gittin to each wife.
Al Tanai?
No, you don't need a Tanai, just each one, is, he said, if this is the get, this is, kind of all Tanai, not all Tanai, but you said, listen, if this is the right get, this is the get. And if the next one's the right get, then the next one's the get. So that's what you do.
So each one gives back the 2 Gittin to the Shliach, and then he gives the same 2 to the other one?
Yeah.
And then who ends
know
up,
something?
who ends
I've
up
got
with
him
what?
here on this page.
It doesn't matter.
With
We're talking about
settings,
the Kenyan.
The speaker
So if you look at the Gemara, here for a moment. The
value.
Gemara says, Montana,
There's no
who's the author
value
of this
here,
Mishnah?
I think.
Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yirmiyah de Lokar Abelazar.
I
Not
have it.
Rabbi
I
Elazar.
have it.
The Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Rafa, you fixed?
Yes, I think I'm all right.
Okay, excellent. We were able to hear
Welcome,
you the whole
Rabbi.
time.
You were always all right, Rabbi Roth. You're always all right.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a setting in your computer, I think.
Yes, it is a setting. I went into settings and I just increased the volume. It was
Excellent.
connected, but there was no voice.
Meaning you weren't hearing, it was correct.
Okay, so
hearing you.
now we can learn, Rabbi. Come.
Walter.
Okay, so I want to get this Gemara in just for a minute, and then we're going to go back. The Gemara says, Montana, who's the author of the Mishnah that says, if you have 2 Gittin and they get mixed up with each other, that you just give each one, right? There are 2 Gittin, they have the same names, the same circumstances, 2 different couples. So each husband gives both Gittin. So the Gemara says, Montana, Rabbi Yirmiyah, it can't be Rabbi Elazar. Why? The Rabbi Elazar, given the Amar Edich Mesira Karsi, Holayadi Beheminayu Kamagarsha. You can do it twice, but each time you don't know for sure. There's no lishma because each time you're not. So each time is only a 50% chance that you're giving the right get.
No, one of them is the right one for sure.
That's mimanavshak, but that's not lishma.
Well, even if you
Lishma,
give it the same time, both of them.
well, but you still don't know which is which. So, I mean, the issue isn't timing. The
But
issue
we've
is,
done this before in other cases where we say if it applies to you, then it should be for you. If it
right.
doesn't
But in those other cases, we were just trying to get it right. We didn't need lishma. Lishma is a certain kind of decisive.
Mhm.
There
There can't be a break in the thought process of the Shema.
Yeah.
Basically.
So what? But listen to what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, no, it's no problem. Abai Amar Filu Tamer Abelazar. Ema de Boy Abelazar Ksiva Lishma Nasina Lishma Mi Bai. That's why I quoted this Gemara for you.
So when they wrote it, he knew what.
But they wait. Let me explain. So what the Gemara says is, even though Rabbi Elazar doesn't require Chasima Lishma, and he does require Ksiva Lishma, so the Rabbi Yirmiyah thought he also needs Mesira Lishma.
Doesn't.
But it's not true. He only needs Ksiva Lishma, not Chasima and not Mesira. So this is the Gemara. Okay.
Isn't there a mandama that holds that Rabbi Lezer holds that you need a chasima also, but that you need the Nasira?
No, so in the end of the Gemara, let's go back to our daf on Gimel Omid Beis. So the Gemara goes back and forth. You don't need to read the whole Shak Vatari because we did last week. In the end, the Gemara says that the last line on Gimel Omid Beis is as follows. I'm sorry, go to Dalet Amud Aleph. I made a mistake. Go to Dalet Amud Aleph. Finally, the Gemara says, This is 3 lines into the Gemara. Eleliolam Rabbi Lazar he. Really, the mandamar of our Mishnah is Rabbi Lazar. The chilo boy Rabbi Lazar chasima. When Rabbi Eliezer doesn't need chasima lishma, what we mean by that is heicha delek edem klal, meaning if he chooses not to insert the ede chasima into the text at all, meaning he holds edem mesira karsi. So according to him, a contract doesn't need the witnesses inside. The witnesses can be
once he does it, it has to be
on the outside. So what we mean in that situation, all he requires is ksiva lishma. However, but heicha deika edim, if the edim do sign, which is an added layer of evidence, then they need to sign lishma. The Amar Rababa Moda Rabbi Lazar the Mezuyaf Mitocho. Rabbi Lazar agrees.
Nice statement, but doesn't make too much.
So what is that based on? So let's discuss. I think we started discussing it at the very end of the previous year, and I want to expand on that just for a few minutes, and then I want to go to the big argument. So the right, I mean, your point is a good point. Like, what does that do? I mean, either you need that the chasima should be lishma or not. But if you don't need edem chasumim and you choose to add them just as an extra protection, why do they need to be lishma? So Rashi, if you could turn just for a minute to the Gemara on Daf Yud Amud Beis. Okay, this is not in the handout Marmakomos, but this is in the Gemaras. I'm assuming most people have a Gemara.
Yep. So
the Gemara on Daf Yud, the Mishnah on Daf Yud Amud Beis says the following: Kol hashtaros. Everybody see a Mishnah on Yud Amud Beis 10b?
In the middle of the daf.
In the middle of the daf. So it's 10b Yud Amud Beis. The Mishnah says the following: Kol hashtaros ha'olim bar kosh shel avakachavim afa pisha chosmeim avakachavim ksherim chutz migitei nashim v'shechruri avadim. Let's say you have a document that is not prepared in a Jewish court, but it's prepared in a non-Jewish court, right? So typically you require any legal document for a Jewish divorce needs Jewish witnesses. So this Mishnah becomes a very interesting test case. We're saying you have a non-Jewish court system, you have non-Jewish judges or witnesses or whatever. So what we're saying is, if you're talking about an area of Jewish law, which is Isur beheter, like Ishus, Gittin, Kiddushin, things like that. So the first mandamar in the Mishnah says that non-Jewish witnesses are not going to work. Not that we don't believe them, but they're just not. It has a ritual component, and for that you have to be, in the parsha of Gittin v'Kiddushin.
Why should we think?
So it's not going to work in Gittin.
Why should we think they have namanis at all? A Mechal Shabbos doesn't have namanis.
Right.
So a Ganef doesn't have namanis. Why should
that's a big argument. We're not going to get into that right now. That's a sugya in Bava Kama and so on. Anyway, so the then the Mishnah says, Reb Shimon Omer af elu ksherin lehuskor lebizman shenasu beheja. So the Gemara says, like, what do you mean that would also be kosher? So if you look at the 2 dots, go down 9 lines down into the Gemara, or if you want, you can go 5 lines up from the bottom of the page. So the Gemara says, Reb Shimon Omer af elu ksherin. The Gemara says, you can't mean that. I mean, non-Jews cannot serve as witnesses in Jewish marriage or Jewish divorce, because they're not part of that whole, legal apparatus. It's a whole different system. Says the Gemara, Am Rab Zera, Yarad Rab Shimon l'shitaso Rabbi Lazar. The Amar Edem Mesira Karsi. The Gemara says, no, don't worry about it. We didn't mean that the non-Jewish witnesses are going to sign the Jewish divorce or the Jewish marriage. What we meant was that even if the text is created there, since we paskin like Rabbi Eliezer, who says Edim Mesira Karsi. So the Jewish witnesses are present at the handing over of the text. And therefore, if there are non-Jewish witnesses that are signed, and you don't need them though, because
we just said before that if the witnesses don't do anything, it's okay. But if there's bad witnesses, then even though Edim Mesira card, it's no good. So,
so that's
we have bad witnesses here with the non-Jewish witnesses.
So that's the next line in the Gemara. So that's exactly what the Gemara says. Ba'amar Rababa, says the Gemara, Mod Rabbi Elazar ben Mezuyef mitocho. Didn't we learn earlier when it came to Lo Lishma that even though Rabbi Eliezer doesn't require a de chasima, but if they do sign, then they have to be proper witnesses because we don't need their participation. The Eidei Chasima. You don't need any signatures in the text. But if we do have signatures in the text, we hold it to the standard of kashrus. So Andav Dalid, what that meant was Lishma. Here we're saying this isn't about Lishma. This is about kashrus. You can't have non-Jewish, witnesses.
You can't have an effective witness.
Yeah. Says the Gemara, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about B'Shemos Muvhakin. We're talking about where the names are, it's clear in the names that they're not Jewish. Right? There were certain names.
What difference does it make?
We live in different times. So it's, there's a lot of, sadly, there's a lot
of difference does it make? I mean, either they're Jewish or they're not Jewish. What difference does it make if the names are recognizable?
Okay, so we'll explain in a minute. So the Gemara says, "Hey chedam mishemus mfakim." What do you mean? It's like a clearly non-Jewish name. What does that even mean? So the Gemara says,
Joseph.
Hermes, like the Greek gods, like we were for Hanukkah.
So clearly not Jewish.
Yeah, there were names, in other words, that had like a religious connotation, or, like Abudina, Bar Shibtai, Bar Kidri, Bati, Nakim, Una, these were names that no Jews.
Names that no Jewish parent would give.
Exactly. So, Aval Shemos Shenim Nevakim, but if there are names that are more on the fence, you don't know. Michael, everybody has named Michael, or so they say. So, you can't tell.
Some names that can have two.
Is the meaning that the names are not Jewish? That is the problem. I mean, it's supposed to have a very pious Jew who has a non-Jewish.
No. We don't care about the names. What we're saying is, what the Gemara is saying is as follows. If we knew, right, if a non-Jew signs on the get, let's say honorifically, because the text was produced in his court, so he signed on the get. So ironically, if we know that he's a non-Jew, then we just ignore it. It's nothing, because he can't be a witness. He's not part of our system of law. So if his name is, Hermes, or Bartholomew, or whatever it is, or Sebastian, or I don't want to say too many names, it'll be somebody's name. But whatever it is, when I was in Rav Soloveitchik's shir, he used to always count he used to call the list, of the names, and he would always like the last name first, and sometimes if he was in a good mood, so he would, I don't know if this was true in Rabbi Roth's day either, there were less people in the shir, but so if he was in a good mood, he would sometimes make, little quips about the people's names. So he'd call somebody's name and he'd say, "Oh, how would you spell that in a get?" Or so there was one fellow in the shir had a very non-Jewish name. So every time he'd come to his name, he'd say, "Ach, how'd your parents give you such a non-Jewish name?" So this Gemara, Hermes and Kidri and Bati, and these are obviously names also that had a religious.
How about Alexander?
What? Well, Alexander, we know, Sender, right?
Alexander was because of the promise to me.
Yeah, he was.
Anyway, but Rabbi Roth, the point is not the name itself. The point is that if it's clear that you can identify who the person is, well, why do we care? So look at Rashi. Rashi explains that the whole problem, Rashi on the bottom of Yud Amud Beis says that the whole din of Modra Abelazar b'mezuyaf mitocho is a din d'Rabbanan. It's a rabbinic problem. The problem is we're worried that you're going to rely on it. The afagav the Omer Abelazar that get she'ein alavedim kosher, dafka ein alavedim. Yesh po edim psulim pasol midrabanan. Dilma ka'asi lemimsori ba'apayu mumismachalayu. The problem is if you have improper edim, we're worried that you might hand over the get in front of those people. You'll say, oh, they're obviously reliable because they signed, and we need now somebody to be present, and that's going to be the real Kinyan. So we're going to use those people. How do you know they're good? How do you know they're kosher edim? Well, they signed. They were good enough to sign, right? But if you have so that's why. Wait, 1 second.
Non-Jews
if you have Shemos Muvakim, if it's Hermes and Zeus and Mars and so on, so they're not Jewish. No one's going to think that that's a kosher aid. So knowing in this sense, in this way, Shemos, because there's clarity. And we can identify, this is Rashi's pshat. Not everybody agrees with this. So because there's clarity, right, therefore there's no danger that you're going to catapult, these people who end up being Edim Psulim. The Gemara tells the same story. There's a Gemara in Sanhedrin. And Chav Chesed days. The Gemara says, there's a certain get or a certain star, actually matnasa, the chosam alai trei gisi. A gis is a brother-in-law. So these two brothers-in-law signed as witnesses on a shtar matana. Now, a gis, a brother-in-law, is a psuledus. It's kurva. They're not. It's not a psul because of their status. It's a psul because of their the fact that they're related, their family. Right?
Isn't it like a shniya?
What?
Isn't it like in the category of a shniya, the brother?
Yeah, something like that. The Gemara says, and that's one of the, it's explicit. If you look in the sugya in Sanhedrin, in the sugya of
Rabbanan or Doraisa?
Doraisa. Brothers-in-law is a psul Doraisa. So, because it's, the Balk Ishto, whatever, it's, so the Gemara says, you can't have two brothers-in-law signing on a shtar. So the Gemara says, well, what if you give it Beidei Mesira? What if you have witnesses, kosher witnesses? So the Gemara says, doesn't matter. Modra Abelazar b'mezuyaf mitocho. That's exactly this case. Why? So Tosas and Rashi there explain, like they explain here, they say, listen, the problem is, if they sign, you'll think you can hand it over in their presence too. You'll say, oh, they signed, obviously, with their good Edim. So Yavo, the way Rashi and Tosas understand the problem of Modra Abelazar b'mezuyaf mitocho is, according to them, it's Shema Yavo Lismoch Alav. But now look at Rashi on Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. But what if it's Shemos Muvakim? If it's clear that this is a non-Jewish name, the clarity helps you, right? Why? The Ovdei Kachavim, the Shemos Muvakim, the Ovdei Kachavim, the Lo Shchichi Yisrael, the Maski, Bahanu Shmoseim. Jews typically don't use those names. The Sulo Asil Mismakalai, the Meida Yadi, the Ovdei Kachavim. It's crystal clear that they only signed on as an honorific. They're not really witnesses, and you can't rely on them.
So typically in a vacuum,
yeah.
When Eidim come for Eidim Mesira, there's no litmus test. So then we go by Chazaka that they're kosher?
I mean, well, you might ask them, but yeah. Just like in court, the assumption is that they're kosher. They don't have to prove they're kosher. You have to prove that they're pasul. So this is according to Rashi and Tosas, the idea. So Tosas explains, now go back to Dalet Amud Aleph, you'll see this is how Tosas understands it. I'm going to show you the other perspective in just a second. Modra Abelazar b'mezuyaf mitocho. Everybody have that on Tosas Dalet Amud Aleph. And if you have the sheets in front of you, we have it there as well. I'm not sure the page number.
Middle of the page on Dalet Amud Aleph.
Right, Dalet Amud Aleph, and probably
middle of the Tosas, middle of the page.
Does everybody need the page number, or everybody's following? If somebody does need the page number, just let me know and I'll find it. But in the Gemara, it's Dalet Amud Aleph for
middle of the Tosas.
Moda Rabbi Lazar b'mezuyaf mitocha. So look at this Tosas. Tosas says, Tema l'ri. The Ri asked a question. Ma inyan shalo lishma l'mezuyaf mitocho. Right? What's the problem of mezuyaf mitocho? As just I'm going to try to get my just 1 second. What is the problem of mezuyaf mitocho? I'm just not finding my copy. Does anybody need help to find the place, or everybody has it?
No, please repeat the place.
Okay, it's if you have a Gemara, it's Daled Amud Aleph 4a, and it's the Tosas Divrei Maskil Modeh Rabbi Eliezer. Everybody have that?
Model Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, got it.
Okay, is there anybody who doesn't have it, or who needs help with the? Okay, I'm assuming if I don't hear, that everybody's good. Okay, so Tosa says the following. Exactly. Tema l'ri. The Ri asked the question. Ma inyan shelo l'shma mezuyaf mitocho shechasumim bo krovim bo psulim. It's one thing to say that we're worried that if somebody who's not a kosher aid is signed on, right, that maybe you'll assume that he's kosher, and then you'll give the get in his presence, or you'll use him for some other edus. That makes sense. But what's the danger if the chasimas shelo lishma, but the edom are ksherim? What's the danger there? That's what Tosa's asking. The hasam b'din mitzvah.
We don't know that they're kosher.
Right, but what does that have to do with lishma? If that's what Tosa's saying. The hasam, if you're talking about somebody who's disqualified and you're writing him in as a signator, even though he's disqualified, you say we can't just ignore that because it's misleading, and we're worried that we'll use him as an aid. Mishum dilma asi lemismach alayu, we're worried that we'll rely on him. Lahasiya, that'll be the basis of her remarrying. O lahotzi maman al pm, or if it's a dinima, it's a choshemish, but it's a civil law case. You'll say, "Oh, these are kosher edim. Look, they're signed in the contract. We can be motzi mamon al yadeim." Afal pisha davar emes, and even if the truth is that what's being, attested to improperly is still true, we don't operate that way.
We need to wait.
The bottom line is not whether it's true or not. We only want to use valid instruments. If a star is not kosher, right, or the part of the star that is not kosher, even if it happens to reflect the truth, we don't want to use it because there's a certain integrity in legal matters. We should be only relying on authentic witnesses.
We require both form and substance.
Well said, exactly. Ein laso celibate is kosher, and he gives an example of that. Could Amar beperik. Arba achin, ninche gabe edim, zimin dechazu b'ksava masade rachman or mipim v'lo mipiksavam, and that's a case which we'll get to. Aval hacha sha'edim ksheir mela shechasmu shalo l'shma, ma takala yesh bekach. But here we're talking about, in our Gemara, we're talking about a situation of what? That the shliach has to say, b'fanai nechtav, b'fanai nechtav. So we're saying, who's that? Rabbi Meir only requires chasima lishma. Rabbi Eliezer only requires ksiva lishma. Why would you require also chasima lishma? So what did the Gemara answer? Because moda Rabbi Eliezer b'mezuyaf mitocha. Rabbi Eliezer only requires ksiva lishma, but if you sign witnesses onto the shtar, then they also have to be lishma. Why? You don't need them. So why do they need to be lishma? If it's an aid puzzle, a disqualified aid, we're worried that will be a springboard for validating him in other contexts when we should not. But if we're talking about, the lishma, what's the fear? We don't need this lishma. We don't need the signature. Says Tosas, matakala yesh im nismach aleim. So then Tosas had an idea. They said, "V'leika l'member di sharinim b'chasmu shelo lishma yavel lahachshir zimnin diachnebu tchila v'yichtevu get al gabe chasimasa." Maybe you're worried that somebody will sign like a document with a blank, literally a blank check of Eidos. Like you'll take a piece of paper or parchment, you'll have witnesses sign, and there's no text. And then later you add the text. It's meaning if they don't have to sign Lishma, they can sign more generically. Maybe it'll be so generic that you won't even have the text in there. And that is a recipe, a prescription for fraud. That's not considered Eidos at all.
But wait, we're not counting the signature anyway. What do we care?
Because the point is that as on a raya level, in terms of, not as Kinyan, but as raya, we say, we read this last week at the Mishnah on Pevav and on Lamed Daled Amud Beis, that Mishum Tikkun Olam, Edom Archos Min Bishtar, even according to Rabbi Lazar, as an Eitz HaTova, right? In case the Edom die, the Edom Asira die.
Forget the Eitz HaTova for a second, because it's still not a requirement. It's an Eitz HaTova.
It's not a requirement, but so Tosas is making a suggestion. They're going to be.
No, my point is that if the Chasima counts, then what you said makes, hits the spot, that if somebody's signing it before anything was written on it, then it's nonsense. I mean, that's terrible. But if the Chasima doesn't count anyway.
So what we're saying is, but it does count.
Wasn't there at all. Right. And
it only doesn't.
The writes the get.
Right.
And then you hand it over with kosher Edom. What's the problem?
Right. So what we're saying is it doesn't count for the Kinyan of the Gerushin. But typically we presume that it counts for the raya of the Gerushin. Meaning, even according to Rabbi Eliezer, if I go to court, if I have witnesses signed in the document and they're kosher witnesses, that can be a basis for the woman remarrying. Like when the woman wants to remarry,
according to Rabbi Eliezer, we would not assume that the signatures are kosher or not kosher. We would disregard the signatures.
No, but the Mishnah says that even for Dafka Rabbi Eliezer, we made the suggestion that it's a good idea to have witnesses sign for the sake of the raya.
A good idea is a good idea. It's still not the halacha.
No. But if you do already and you're relying on them, then the reliance has to be accurate. And if they could sign before there's even a text, then they're not good even for raya. So that's still a problem. But the Gemara just isn't worried. You'll see in a second. Tosas says
that could happen anytime. So how do you protect yourself against that?
Right. So that's what Tosas says. Tosas says, well, then in Dinei Mamonos, you should worry about that too. That's the next line. Dim kein mitam zeh gam b'shar shtaros hayolanu lahatzrich chasima lishma. No one ever said you need chasima lishma in a real estate deal or in a loan contract. But if the problem was, we're worried, that everything will be done backwards. If the Edom will first sign, then you'll fill in the text, etc. If that was the problem, then that should apply in any star. That's what you were just asking, right? So Tosa says, V'yesh lomar, there's still something to worry about. Chasima atuksiva. Dim ein osa chasima lishma gazrinan penelo yichtevu gam haksiva lishma. Tosa says, the problem is this. If you don't have the witnesses sign lishma, then people will get the impression that lishma is not a requirement or a serious requirement yet, and then they won't be careful to do the ksiva lishma either. So this idea that you could, it's a little bit dochak. According to Tosas, the whole idea of Moda Rabbi Lazar b'mezuyach mitoko, as it emerges, is a din d'Rabbanan. It's a chashash. We're worried, about things that could go wrong, that people could get the wrong, impression, etc.
But it's hard to take that position when the whole issue is an argument as to which part of the procedure has to be lishma now. In other words, if that's what the essence of the argument is, then how can we say, well, we're worried that somebody may think from one to the other? The whole issue is that it's not everything that has to be lishma.
Right, so that's a good point.
I don't understand the answer.
So this is the view of Rashi. This is the view of Tosas. However, if you look at the Rashba, now we go to our sheets. I found my sheets finally. So look on page I have it on page 4. Does everybody have it? Chidushe Harajba, Masechet Gittin Dalet Omid Aleph? On the sheets? Page 4 on the sheets.
On the sheets, there's the Ran.
You see Chidushe Harajba?
Harashba.
1 second. After Tosas Gittin Dalet Omid Aleph, the Kaimalan, there's another. Do you see the Chidushe Harajba Gittin Dalet Omid Aleph? It would either be the end of 3,
Yeah.
the bottom of
The middle.
3, or the
Rabbi Eliezer, page 3. I have it here.
Chidushe Harajba. You have it page 3?
I have it page 3. Amud bed.
You have Chidushe Harajba Masachet Gittin Dalet Omid Aleph. On my sheet, it's on page 4. Anybody?
Oh, here it is. Masechet Gittin Dalet Omid Aleph.
Yeah, but do you do the Chidushe Harajba?
Yeah, that's it.
Is it page 4? What page is that?
What page? I have no idea. I can't tell from this thing what page. It's just one continuous thing. But I found it sort of in the middle. Chidushe Harajba Masechet Gittin Dalet.
That's it. Yeah.
But let's go on anyway.
Okay. So the Rajba says an amazing thing. He asks the same question. Iboy Semer le Olam Rabbi Lazar. He v'chilo boy Rabbi Lazar chasim l'shma. Heichad alek edim klal. Oval heichadika edim boy. Amarav Mod Rabbi Lazar b'mzuyaf mitocho pasal. That's just a quote of the Gemara. Rajba says kashalon. We are troubled by this. Dilo shaykh lemeimar mzuyaf mitocho le b'shachosmin bo psule edus kegite nashim shechosmin bo goyim kedi isol kaman o psule kurva kahimat nasa tavachosmi Allah tregisi beperik zavari. He says if we're talking about edim who are disqualified, then it makes a lot of sense because we're worried that people will validate their status based on their signatures. They'll say, oh, they're signed in a document, they must be kosher edim. And they're not kosher edim, they're non-Jews, they're krovim.
So whatever.
Avokan she'edav ksherin, but if we're talking about kosher edim, el shelo chasmuhu lishma, the afhein einon tzrichen lachtam lishma. It's not a problem. They weren't supposed to sign lishma. We don't need them to sign lishma. So my psul ika. What's the problem? According to Rabbi Meir, according to Rabbi Lazar, the Edei Chasim are not the ones that are doing the job. So why do they need lishma? There's no misunderstanding about their kashrus. So listen to the Rajba's version of Tosas. The Tirtza B'Tosas, okay. The Kivin de lo nichtam lishma, since they didn't sign lishma, chayshinan, we're worried, dilma chasmu an yar chalak, v'achakach kasva lavas aget. Remember the bottom of Tosas. We're worried about the fact they'll sign like a blank check, and then later you'll fill in the details, and that's a problem. Says the Rajba Vakasha, the imkenaf b'shar shtaros nitzra chasima lishma, lots of sidei chashashazu. Exactly what Tosas said. And that should apply not only in a get, but should apply in real estate and in any other transaction. The nishar lahem ba'inim b'kusha. He says, and the Bali Tosas left it as a question, meaning he doesn't have their last line, I guess, where they say, oh, we're worried if you'll sign, if we don't demand chasima lishma, then people won't be careful about ksiva lishma. That line, he obviously didn't like it either, so he left it out. He figured, I'll just, the best I can do for Balei Tosas will be to say that they leave it b'tzarachiyah. They're not sure. But he himself says something sensational. Says the Rajba, "V'nira de mishum hachi karale mezuyaf mitocho." I think that it's mezuyaf mitocho, says the Rajba, mishum deledidei ksiva lishma boy. Really, according to Rabbi Eliezer, what do you need? What do you need lishma for? The kasav, the ksiva, right? So he says, but the pshad is that chasimasan shel edim michlal ksivas hagedi. The pa'amim she'en kan edim mesira. The get zem iskayim b'chosamav. The kasher afler Rabbi Lazar. He says the following. Minat Torah, what do you require for the Shema? This is ingenious, right? You need v'kasav. What is v'kasav?
That's the big
Well,
question.
says the Rajba, listen to this. I mean, minimally, if you write the minimum, meaning you don't put in Eidei Chasima, then there's no lack of v'kasav. You're just telling the story. But if you do insert the Eidei Chasima, says the Rajba,
Expanded
that becomes part of the v'kasav. I mean, you decided to tell a bigger story. How so? Because of what I said a second ago, which is, even though according to Rabbi Eliezer, the Eidei Chasima, we'll discuss this in a minute, but according to Tosas, the Eidei Chasima alone cannot accomplish the Kinyan Gerusha, because Eidei Masira Karsi, right? However, they can accomplish something. Their presence is significant. It's not just honorific. They can accomplish Raya. That's why the Mishnah says that even according to Rabbi Eliezer, Mishum Tikkun Olam, they suggested that Eidei Chasima sign on the get. Why? Because if the Eidei Masira go traveling, or if the Eidei Masira who are mortal, end up passing away, then how will she be able to marry someone else? If the rabbi is going to say, oh, you were in a previous relationship, you were married, you were divorced.
What if the Eidei Chasima die?
No, that's a problem because they're signed in the Eidei Machasum al Ashtar.
Why don't we just have the Eidei Masira sign the get that they gave it over?
If they do, then maybe that would be fine.
That
But
would
if
be
they
all right. Why do we have to go back to? We already have the Eidei Masira.
So then you would require.
Let them. You want to give Eitzah Tova? Let them sign that on the July 5th or whatever date in Hebrew calendar we gave over this get signed the Aaron Fried and Yankel Goldstein. Okay,
right, because they can only do that at the tzibui, at the behest of the Baal. Otherwise, that's called a topic we still have to discuss. Mipiem velo mipik sava. It's only a shtar if it's written b'dasa miskaya. So it has to be at the earlier stage. But this is a brilliant idea, meaning, even according to Rabbi Eliezer, the Eidei Machasumim who sign earlier, if they sign earlier, are effective in establishing from an evidentiary point of view that there was a get. Says the Rajba, so that if that's the case, if they add their signatures, that's helpful. And since it's helpful, it's like an expanded ksiva. So that's not a din d'Rabbanan. It's not because what a radical.
But it's a double-edged sword because if it's an extended ksiva, then any defect in the chasima kills the whole ksiva.
Exactly.
You can have it both
Torah's ksiva. So it isn't that you need.
You can have a perfect ksiva, lishma, and somehow you mess up the chasima. According to this Rashba, the whole ksiva would be defective.
Correct. That's how he understands the words. Moda Rabbi Lazar b'mezuyaf mitocho. Not a din d'Rabbanan. This could go wrong, and you'll make this mistake. That could go wrong, and you'll make this mistake. If you do this, then we're worried that you won't do that.
The lesson is tafatzim rubelot tafatzim. Best thing is not.
It is, but it's a remarkable idea. It's an ingenious expansion of the doraisa of a kasav l'sefer krisis. What we're saying is, if you add, even on a raya level, right, that is considered part of the expanded ksiva, and the ksiva needs to be lishma. So if you ignore it,
the chasima is just a variant of the ksiva.
It's an expansion of the ksiva. I wouldn't call it a variant.
But the idea that you sign is just your adjective you're adding to the ksiva. You're explaining what kind of ksiva it is. But there's only one thing called ksiva. Ksiva is a subset of ksiva. Correct.
So when the Gemara says you need to say b'fanai nachtam, and the author is Rabbi Lazar because of Moder Rabbi Lazar b'mezuyaf mitocho, the way the Rajba, in a brilliant way, is explaining it, is it's a little bit of a misnomer. When you say b'fanai nachtam, it's factually true, But the real principle of it is you've expanded v'kasav, and since you've expanded v'kasav, that expanded v'kasav needs to be lishma.
But if you
Quite
think about
brilliant.
it, according to Rashba, you shouldn't have to say Fananechta, should only say Fananechta.
Right, except that you want to make sure that pragmatically you understand what the person means by it. That's exactly correct. Meaning conceptually, it isn't really b'fanei nechtav, it's really b'fanei nechtav. But practically, it's now extending to the chasima. It's not the same as the b'fanei nechtam of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says, Edi chasima karsi. For him, the chasima is a chasima. And that's what requires lishma. The ksiva doesn't even require lishma. For Rabbi Eliezer, the ksiva requires lishma, but since the chasima, contributes to the whole, effectiveness of the get by serving as evidence of the transaction, which allows her to move forward in life. Therefore, it integrates into the kasav. So he says, listen to this. What do you do with the Gemara? What's the Shemos Muvhakim then of the Gemara about Hermes and Atuna and all the Greek gods or whatever they are? If you hold like Rashi and Tosfos, who say the problem is we're going to rely on these people and think that they're good Adim, we're not going to realize that they're non-Jews or that they're Krovim or that they're Psulim. So you can understand why Shemos Muvhak, it's a dead giveaway. It's not a Jewish name, right? But according to the Rashba, how will you explain Shemos Muvhakim? So look at the next line. Think the Rashba didn't know that question? Of course he did. So he says, where are we?
We say,
Kivin sheniskaim b'chosamav lav mezuyafu. Since this is an authentic signatures, it's not a forgery. Ubavadai kivin kedindim sar b'fnei shnayim. Probably this is a proof that this get was given properly in the presence of physical witnesses. Ukedin nasa lishma ubatalush. Ubishar tikuni again, everything was done properly. The kiva de ede chasima mashvala get kasher, since the ede chasima contribute in evidentiary, from an evidentiary point of view, in establishing that this is a proper get. The vadai mechalal ksiva sagetain, that's included in it's an expanded ksiva. The hilkach therefore, kiva de chasimi alei ilo chasmi lishma mezuyaf mitocha karina lei, because it's a flaw in the kasav. So then he says, v'teidalach, the proof is, to get shechosmav goyim, kasher l'Rab Shimon. If the non-Jews sign, it's fine. V'amrinan, yard Rav Shimon l'shitasel shrabelazar, da'amar edim esira karsei, v'akshina, this is the Gemara that we read before. How could it be? Rav Lazar mzuyif mitocho, shupasel, uparkin, the Gemara there gives an answer, hacha b'mayaskina b'shemos mufhakim, if it's names that are obviously non-Jews, we're not worried about it. Why? Alma, kol she'ein somchan aleim, ve'ein machshirin aget al chasimasan, lo chashina nichasu l'shma, although delav mechlalo shall get hein. So the Rashba has a much better pshat than the other Gemara too. What did the Gemara say? If the names are obviously non-Jewish, then it's not a problem. It's not mezuyaf mitocha. Right? So the way Rashi and Tosfos explained it was because the whole problem of mezuyaf mitocho is a din d'Rabbanan, that we're worried you're going to elevate these people to being proper Eidim, thinking that they're kosher Eidim. But if there's Shemos Muvhakim, you don't have that worry. It's obvious that Sebastian and Hermes and whatever are not Jews, and therefore it's no problem. The Rashba says, yeah, for me it's even better, because what am I saying? That the reason that the Eidei Chasima are pasal midoraisa, even though you don't need Lishma and Chasima, but you need Lishma if there is a Chasima, because that's an extended Ksiva. Why is it an extended Ksiva? Because the Eidei Chasumim are going to function, even though they can't create the get, but they can attest to the kashrus of the get, and that's important too, and therefore they're part of the extended Ksiva. But if it's a non-Jew, then he can't even serve as a raya for the get. And therefore, there's no problem. That's not part of the ksiva. That's just honorific. That's just extra ink. So the Rajba's interpretation takes Moder Abelazar b'mzuyaf mitocho, and it turns it into a dinda raisa, a fundamental expansion of ksiva saget based on the raya. Okay? Having said that, the Rajba goes a step further. He says, "Uledivrei Harav Alfis." Everybody with me?
Yep.
Shekosav de Rabbi Lazar Eda Chasim Anami Karsi, Efshar Lomar de Eno Kosher Klal. Kivin Shepa'amim Karsi Lishma Be'inan. Dechi Kosav Lishma Kosav Koi, Benak Ksiva Saget Be'atzmo, Benak Ksiva Sa'edim. So let me explain. So here we now enter into the very, I mentioned this last week, a very impassioned, almost 50-50 argument, between the different halachic cultures. So the view of Rashi and Balitosis and the Bala Ma'or and Rabbeinu Ephraim and the Rush, the view of the entirety practically of Ashkenaz and Tzarfat, Germany and France, and the Ashkenazic world, was that if you hold Eidei Mesira Karsi, meaning what is a shtar, what is a contract? The contract is not the signed witnesses. The contract is the text, right? And the presence of witnesses at the moment when the text is handed over to the beneficiary, the woman, the purchaser, the creditor, right? You need edim, not in the text, but to witness the giving over of the text to the other party.
Anyone attesting to the lishma of the ksiva in this approach?
Say that again?
Is anyone attesting to the lishma factor for the ksiva in this process?
Of the ksiva or the mesira?
Ksiva. According to
we're talking to Rabbi Lazar, so according to Rabbi Lazar, you always need ksiva lishma.
Huh?
You always need ksiva lishma according to Rabbi Eliezer.
So who is attesting to that right now? That the ksiva lishma. Doesn't sound like there's anybody.
If there are Eidei Chasima, then it's implicit in the Eidei Chasima, but
There's no Eidei Chasima. Who's the test? So how do we know the ksiva is lishma according to Rabbi Lazar? How do we ever know the ksiva is lishma?
Well, that's what the Eid Echad is accomplishing in saying b'fanei nechta.
That's from Chutz La'aretz. But in a regular Eretz Yisrael, if you hold like a Rabbi Eidei Mesira, all right. So
the row there's
according to Rabbi Lazar in Eretz Yisrael,
right. So the Gemara says
I assume he also says the ksiva has to be lishma.
Of course.
Okay, so how do we know?
Because that's what the Gemara
Eidei
says.
Mesira are not testifying to that.
Right, but the Gemara says that Stam Sifri. That's what the Gemara said here on
We
the
assume
previous
that
Talmud.
the soul from Noah, and they will not write it. Okay.
Stam Sifri. Whatever are Bikiyim.
That's only according to one of them, Rabbi or Rava, that holds that way. That's the issue.
That's within Rabbah. We're talking about within Rabbah.
Yeah, Rava would have a.
Rava doesn't think it's a problem to begin with. He doesn't think you even need the shliach for that. So that's not a problem. So this is the issue. The whole world of Ashkenaz thought that according to Rabbi Lazar, the Eidei Mesira Karsi, if you have Eidei Chasima, no Eidei Mesira, then it's not a proper get. The Rif, on the other hand, disagrees. The Rif and the Rambam and the Ramban and the Ravid and the Rajba and the whole Sephardic world, and half of the Provence is like split in half, like it usually is. So they're all of the opinion that when Rabbi Eliezer says Eidei Mesira Karsi, it means also Eidei Mesira Karsi. But Eidei Chasima alone will also work. So that, for example, according to this Sephardic view,
also work, or you need Eidei Mesira also?
No, you don't. Eidei Chasima alone will be effective.
So he's saying it's an either or?
Either or. The preference is to have both, because we prefer Eidei Masira, and we want to have the Tikkun Olam.
Raya purposes.
Right, but that's for Raya purposes. But from a Kinyan point of view, you could have one or the other. So if you look at the Rif for a minute, we have it here in the Marmakomos. It's either in the back of the Gemara on Pei Vav Amud Aleph in the very back of the Shas Gemara. But if you have the Marmakomos in front of you, so you could look on page. Just 1 second. 1 second.
The Ran.
Yeah.
The Rashba.
It should be before the Ran. It should probably be on page 4. 1 second. No, it's
The
not
Ran
on
is
page
the
4.
Rashba. And it's
Give me a
Tosfos
second.
before that.
Just give me 1 second. I'm just trying to find it. Let's see, 1 second. 5 is the Ran. Don't tell me I left it out. That would be very silly.
I don't think it's here. I don't see it.
Oh, really?
We got the Rashba, we got the Ran.
Okay, that's my mistake. 1
We
second.
have Halacha, we have the Rambam. The Rambam again, and then we have Lechem Mishnah.
Okay, my mistake. My mistake. It's a big mistake. 1 second. You're saying we don't have the Rif here.
Doesn't appear that way.
Oh, we do. Sorry. Page 1.
Oh, all the way in the beginning? Okay.
Okay. Page 1.
The bottom.
Towards the
Rif.
bottom, it says Rif Masachet Gittin.
Yeah.
Daf Mem Zayin Amud Aleph.
In the Daper Rif, correct. So listen to this. Hilchos HaKarab Lazar Begittin. Says the Rif, Mehan Nami Shaminan. From here we learn, Delo Be'inan Ede Masira, Hecha De'ika Ede Chasima. That if you have Ede Chasima, Rabbi Eliezer thinks that you could get away without Ede Chasima, as long as you have Ede Masira. But if you do have Ede Chasima, I mean you have signatures in the document, right? Then you can get away without Ede Masira. Okay. The Harav, the first Raya I'm not going to explain because it's a little complicated. Maybe we'll get back to it. I'm just going to read it very quickly, so just follow with me.
And that
Harav
fits
the
into
Amar
words,
Nisis
Eidim Mesira
Echad.
Karta.
What?
That fits into the words Eidim Mesira Karta that the Gemara says. If you translate the words Eidim Mesira Karta that the Gemara says,
Right.
It would seem to indicate that he's saying that that's what counts, the Eidim Mesira.
So this is the question that that the Bala Ma'or or Rabbeinu Ephraim asks. He says, according to you, Mr. Rif,
Rabbi Rif.
instead of saying Ede Masira Karsi, Rabbi Eliezer should have said Af Ede Masira Karsi.
Exactly.
Meaning also Ede Masira Karsi. But by saying Ede Masira Karsi and Rabbi Meir says Ede Chasima Karsi, it sounds like each one is digging their heels in and saying only my way, no other way. He should have said Af Ede Masira Karsi. We'll get to that question. That's the question of Rabbeinu Ephraim quoted in the Bala Ma'or. Okay. Anyways, what the Rif says, you can see the lo bina Ede Masira hechadik Ede Chasim. If you have only Ede Chasim alone, but that's good too. The Rav the Amar Nises Beidachon Sav Yad Sofer Shavlad Mamzer. This is a proof that he brings. V'hu Amar Lacha Karblazer Begitin. V'isol Kedaitach Be'inan Ede Masira hechadik Ede Chasima. If you think you need Ede Masira under all conditions, even if you have Ede Chasima, Hashtahecha Deleke Ede Chasima Klal. If you don't have any Ede Chasima, but either way you have to have Ede Masira. Afil Ede Echad Mach Shirav. It sounds like in a certain case in the Gemara that if you have one witness signed on a get, one and not two, that somehow that's puzzle. So the Rif says, how could that be puzzle? Either way, you need Ede Masira. You need Edom present when the get is handed over, right? So what do we care if there's only one witness signed? You don't need any witnesses.
We said before, when you signed effectively, that affects the shtar.
Okay, so that you'll see the Gaonim, that the Rif in the very end of the piece, the long piece, In the end, he says, I want to tell you what the Gaonim say. They say that. Okay, we'll get to that. Mahavali Avladma Atu Eidechad Migra Gara Mehechad Aleka Ed Klal. Can having an Eidechad kosher be worse than having no aid?
Well, that's
Maybe.
the first question we asked on that in the beginning. Why it's against the logic?
There might be a difference between.
Yeah, we went out of our way to say that is the case.
Right, but there might be a difference between the absence of lishma or an eid pasul and an eid echad, right? Ela vaday mid pasul rab eid echad u'machshir hechad deike de mesira afilu leke eid echad shaminu dai de pasul eid echad hechad de leke. Must be a case where there are no eid mesira. The ike bechasima shnei edim machshir afagav de leke de mesira. Well, he says obviously what the Gemara means is that according to Rabbi Lazar, you need either eid mesira or an eid chasima. Let's say you have only one Eid Chasima and not two, and now Eid Masira. That's no good. But if you have two, but if you have two Eid Chasima, then that'll be good even without Eid Masira. Funny, this is what we mean. Now, this is brilliant. This is where the riff starts, this is where you see inside the word, the riff's mind. Listen to this. He said, Riff says, I'm going to bring you another proof. That what? That Eidei Chasima alone have the ability to create a get. And that when we say Eidei Masira Karsi, we mean either Eidei Masira or Eidei Chasima. What's the proof? He says, Hainu de Katani, She'ena Eidim Chos Mimalaget Ela Mipnei Tikuna Olam. Doesn't the Mishnah say that it would be better if there were Eidei Chasima, because then you'll have a raya in case the physical Eidei Masira die, or if they go traveling and you don't have access to them. It's better if there are signatures in the get, right? Says the Rif, Klomar, the Ileka get, what does that mean? So how did Bali Tosis understood it? And Bala Ma'or and Rajba was quoting from Tosis, that even though Eidei Chasima don't work,
Eidei Raya.
They could be Raya. So what the Rif is saying is, if they didn't work as Kinyan, then their Raya doesn't extend to the requirements of the Kinyan either. The only way that they would work as Raya would be to say, you know what, everything was done properly, including the presence of Eidei Masira separately. Can Eidei Chasima attest to the presence of Eidei Masira?
No.
That's what the Rif says. So the Rif says it must be that what the Mishnah meant was something totally different.
But that's not.
One second. Tosas is explaining the Gemara. The Mishnah is saying, even though you'll need Eidei Masira for the Kinyan get, and without it, there's no Kinyan get, it's still a good idea to have Eidei Chasima so you can bring it to court and prove that it all happened properly. Right? But if you bring it to the Eidei Chasima to court, and then somebody says, were there Eidei Masira on this get? Are the Eidei Chasima signatures telling you that everything was good and done, including Eidei Masira? Bali Tosa say yes. I'll show you in a minute.
I don't think Bali Tosa is saying yes. Bali Tosa
they certainly say yes.
They're saying
they say yes explicitly.
Look, you have to remember, somebody's coming 10 years later and questioning this action. Maybe you just made it all up.
No. There's no questioning. This is the rule of Eidei Shtar, of Reish Lakish. Eidei Machasumim ala Shtar. They're dead. They don't exist anymore. A star, by the way, let me explain. That's the charm of a star. It's frozen in time. The Eidush of a star
is a chazaka on a star. Star has a strong chazaka, right? Of kashrus.
Or more than that. I mean, it's a chazaka, but it's more than a chazaka. So the point is that as long as you can attest to the signatures that they're authentic, if somebody says, "Oh, it's a forgery," then you have to prove that they're authentic signatures. But if you can if you can establish that the signatures are authentic, then the shtar is proof.
It's not just proof.
It's bottled up, in an infinite package of edus. So are they also testifying that everything was done properly? There was lishma. There was Eidei Masira.
That's a special aspect of the shtar.
Well, that's the special din of Eidush of a shtar. But so what the Rif disagrees with, the Rif says, listen, if these two Eidim have the ability to create a Kinyan Gerushin, then their Raya ability extends to all the conditions that would be necessary.
Well, that's not the case in the shtar.
I'm just telling you what he said. This is what this is Klomar.
I mean, he's trying to create his own rule, basically.
He's not creating his own rule. What he's saying is like this. Listen, how much can the Eidei Chasima attest to?
The same they can attest to in a star.
No, we're talking about we're talking about a star.
Yeah.
This is the core din of Reish Lakish that we're examining now. Right? We say Eidei Machasuma Malashtar, if two witnesses sign in a document. Now remember, this is what you have to remember, and we'll have to stop here and pick up with this next time, but this is what you have to remember. This is the enormous innovation of the halacha's perspective of contracts and of testimony through contracts. Because when the witnesses sign in a contract, typically, there's no evidence that they saw the event. That's what the Mishnah says in Bava Basra. Kosvin shtar lilove, afal pi she'ein amal v'imo. Kosvin shtar li'isha, kosvin get li'isha, afal pi she'ein, I'm sorry, kosvin shtar lebal, afal pi she'ein ha'isha imo. Kosvin shtar le lokeach, lemocher, sorry, afal pi she'ein halokeach imo, meaning the person who is going to be adversely affected by this contract, he calls up the sofer and he calls up the Eidim and he says, I want you to prepare this contract for me. But if you hold Eidei Chasima, the Eidei Chasima are not there unless it's a coincidence. They don't need to be there at the time when the transaction is actually executed. How do we know that the execution of the transaction took place? We say like this: did the get fall out of the Baal's pocket and it happened to have been picked up by the Isha? No, there's a chazaka.
Certain presumptions.
Right?
With a star.
If the Isha is waving the star, and has her name on it, then and she's making the claim that it was given to her by the husband, right? And it has witnesses signed in it, which means it's a document of stature that if it fell in the street, somebody picked it up, they wouldn't give it to her, they would turn it into Bezdin. So if it's Yotzi mitachas yada, we put it all together, we connect the dots. We say, obviously, there was a proper Masira. Now, if coincidentally there were witnesses, if they're Eidei Masira, that never happens, because the Eidei Masira are there, they actually see the transaction. But I'm talking about Eidei Chasima, do not have to see the transaction. So how much can the witnesses be relied upon in terms of the weight of testimony in an event that they actually didn't see? But where you're connecting the dots.
The same way that
so one second. So the Baalei Tosas say, whatever is part of the typical requirements of the transaction is attested to by the combination of the signed witnesses and the what we call umdana, or the rove, that if this is being held, by the proper party, that everything was done properly.
That's basically a chazaka.
So that chazaka also includes, if you need Eidei Masira, the chazaka was that the shtar was handed over in front of an Eidei Masira.
But that's the power of the shtar. It's not logical.
However, the Rif says it's one thing to say that the shtar was handed over, meaning it didn't fall out of somebody's pocket and somebody picked it up and it happened to end up in the hands of the beneficiary. It's quite something else to say that something additional, extraneous happened, namely that it was given to the woman in the presence of Eidei Masira. That, the Rif says, that additional piece of information does not come under the rubric of the raya of shtar. And therefore, what's the point of the tikkun olam of having witnesses sign in the shtar for a raya? Says the Rif.
But the woman
has
to get in her hand, no?
One second. So the Rif says the answer is because Rabbi Eliezer doesn't require Eidei Masira. He requires either Eidei Masira or Eidei Chasima. So if the witnesses are signed, they're not signed only as raya, they're signed as backup kinyan. Once they sign, there's a kinyan because they are the Eidim on the actual
Why don't we just fall back to the fact that she's holding the shtar in her hand, just like about and therefore the Eidei Chasima is sufficient. As a
You can only say that if Eidei Chasima are Karsi, but the Bali Tosa say that for Rabbi Eliezer.
No, for raya purposes. In other words, basically we always said that the Korach of the shtar is, amongst other things, that if somebody's holding the shtar in their hand, there's certain assumptions. So the given is the same thing. She's holding.
But then you know it was given, but you don't necessarily know it was given in the presence of two other witnesses.
But you don't know by shtar plenty of things also. But the
right.
Shtar is the
So the question is, what are the core things and what are the extra things? So the Bali Tosa say the core things are anything that is necessary to make it valid. And if necessary to make it valid includes the presence of Eidei Masira, then that's what we call Hakol Behechsher Nasa. And then they add, V'afilu shenimsar b'fnei Eidei Masira. That's what Tosa says in a bunch of places, including
the definition.
But the Rif is saying something amazing. The Rif is saying to say that it's not a forgery, to say that it didn't fall out of your pocket. Those are the minimum things that the Eidei Chasima say. To say that it was given in the presence of two other kosher witnesses, that's already taking it too far. So how is it going to? So what does it help you then?
So it gets
the answer is it only helps you because it also works in its own right. You don't need the Eidei Masira according to the Rif. If you have Eidei Chasima, they do the Kenyan.
But doesn't all depend on the definition of Reish Lakish's takana?
Exactly. So the Rif is telling us something quite extraordinary. And what I'm trying to show here is that the legal thinking.
And everybody follows his opinion down Sephardic thing, Rambam.
They all follow the Rif.
I mean, these are not small things.
No, this is a raya of the Rif. Not everybody has to agree with his proof, but his position they all agree with. Namely, that Eidei Chasima, even according to Rabbi Eliezer, remember his position is the lenient position.
Has the Rambam given a different explanation?
The Rambam on this part is the same. I think there are differences, which I'll get to. But if you want to just look at the Rambam, with this we'll conclude for today. Look at the Rambam in Perek Aleph, Hilchos Gerushin, Halacha Yud Gimel, Yud Dalet, Tesvav, and Tezayin. This is on page.
Towards the end.
Page 6. Starting from page 6.
Aleph, Halacha, above?
No. Halacha Yud Gimel through Tezayin.
Yeah,
the next one.
Yeah.
The Rambam says this. We'll go through the Rambam and then we'll talk more next week. Oh, next week is the Chanukah Shir?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
20th.
Same time, same place, right?
I guess so.
Yes. 7:30.
And I'll send you also, because I'm giving for my mother, I'll send you the information on that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Uminayin sheitnena la b'fnei edim, says the Rambam. How do you know you have to give? You need Eidei Kiyum also. It's be special edus in Gittin and Kedushin. Hare Omer al pi shnayim edim o shlosh edim yakum davar v'yefsha shetia lo hayom erva v'haba le'al mitzvas bezdin v'lamachar tia muteris blo edim. The Rambam says, listen, her change in status affects many people, so we're not going to rely, simply on their, say so. We need witnesses. Therefore, if the get was given without witnesses, even though they both agree it took place, that's not good enough for us. Next. Bamedvar mamurim. Kishahayaget biksav yad sofer. That's if the text was written by a sofer, a third party. Avalim kasav abala get biksav yad v'chasam alav eidechad v'nasno reza get pasul. But if he himself wrote it, then it would be kosher min Torah and only pasul min Rabban. Good. Next. Takonas chachamim halacha tesvav. Shiyu edim chosim amalagat. That's the end of Mishnah Lamed Daled Amud Beis and Pei Vav Amud Aleph. Midrabanan, right? We say that you should have edim signed in the get. Shema yiten laget b'fnei shnayim v'yamusu, because maybe he'll give a get. The edim Masira will die. Nimsa haget shebiyada kecheres micheres adama, and then the paper is just a piece of paper, and there's no evidence that it was ever given as a get. Shari eimbo edim. Lefikach tiknu sheya'idu mitocho. Therefore, they said better that in addition to edim Masira, they should sign. But even though that's the case, it's still preferable no solo b'fnei shnayim בין עושה למי למחוסם עליו, בין בפני שניים אחרים, שעיקר הגירושין באידי מסירה. But still, the preference and the main psak is Eidei Mesira Karsi. Now comes Halacha Tezayin. This is where he paskins like the Rif. Says the Rambam, Chasmu bo shnayim. Let's say the two sign, V'avar v'nasna lo beino leveina, and then he doesn't have Eidei Mesira. Meaning, even though the preference is Eidei Mesira and Eidei Chasima, let's say there are Eidei Chasima alone, let's say he tries to do Eidei Mesira, and one of them turns out to be Pasul. Hareza Kosher, the get b'diavad is Chal, Hol v'Eidim Shabok Ksherim, because the Eidei Chasima are Ksherim, assuming they're Ksherim. Harei get Yotze b'tachas yada. The Yesh Shahorim and Agaonim show Pasul that it's Pasul Midrabana. But what is the Rambam Paskin? Like the Rif. So there's a major debate between the Rif and the Balei Tosas and Rashi. Namely, the Rif and the Rambam hold that even according to Rabbi Eliezer, it's a big kula, meaning a get only be'edei Mesira is kosher, a get only be'edei Chasima is kosher.
So
Whereas Rashi and Tosfos and the Bala Ma'or all say that we paskin like Rabbi Eliezer, you have to have Eidei Mesira somewhere. It's better to have both because then you have the raya in addition to the kinyan. But if you have a shtar, a get, the Eidim Chasima, and there were no Eidim present when it was handed over, then that is not a proper divorce.
So the Chaber will paskin like the Rif.
So we'll get to that. But we need to examine more fully this argument and different aspects of it. So we see a very fascinating. Oh, 1 second. So I'll leave you with this thought. Sorry, I'm a little over time. Says the Ravid, the Rif didn't say this. The Ravid said, you know what? If the Rif is right, but this is what the Rajba was quoting. If the Rif is right, that what? That Eidei Chasima also can serve the function of Gerushin. And that's the pshat of
According to Rabbi.
Olam. He says, so then we can understand better another Doraisa way of understanding Moda Rabbi Lazar b'mezuyaf mitocho. Meaning, what's the problem? If Rabbi Lazar believes Eidei Mesira Karsi and not Eidei Chasima Karsi, why would the Chasima have to be Lishma? Why is that, if the absence of Lishma, why is that Mezuyaf Mitocha? The Chasima is nothing. Says the Ravid, it's not nothing according to the Rif. You could actually end up doing the Gerushin through the Eidei Chasima without the Eidei Mesira. And therefore,
even
it's
according to the
because
Rif, the Eidei Chasima is no good, but the Eidei Mesira is good. The get will be good. So what's the problem?
So he's saying for the Eidei Chasima to be a backup for the Kinyan, maybe they need to be Lishma because they're Korsim in that case.
But they're only a backup. But if the Mesira is good, even according to the Rif,
right?
Okay.
But so maybe we'll discuss it. There are 3 different views. So maybe it's only going to be Ma'akev.
Yes, though.
If you need them.
In a few minutes.
If you actually need them.
All right, 2 weeks from now.
Let's say the Eidei Mesira are pasul. So then if the Eidei Chasima weren't Lishma, then you're not going to have a get.
Yeah, that's the problem. But if the Eidei Chasima are no good by themselves, it's the get is still good according to the Rif.
Exactly. Okay, so we'll stop here. Next week we'll do something on Hanukkah, Yirch Hashem. And in 2 weeks we will continue with discussing this very pivotal, debate that split the halachic world, whether Eidei Mesira Karsi and Eidei Chasima Karsi are mutually exclusive. We'll see some of the other fascinating ripples of this argument. Okay, have a good week, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.